Completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and twice a week I like to pop on here and give you some tools to work with to better see through the smokescreen and through some of the spin and deception engaged in by much of the legacy media. It's happening here in Idaho just like it's happening everywhere else, and hopefully you come away not so much convinced that everything I'm telling you is the truth, but simply more convinced that you've got to be serious about vetting the truth for yourself. Now, I'm going to start out with something very useful, and I got to give a quick tip of the hat to the musician Zuby, who posted, I guess you would call this kind of a translator for people now that we're living in the woke era. When you hear certain phrases pop up in the media, you may wonder what they really mean. Well, Zuby, being a talented musician and wordsmith, has offered us a little bit of help. This is the 2023 edition of his woke translator. So, when you hear someone in the news refer to hate, what they're really referring to is disagreement. When they say far right, that's code for conservative. Racist, well, that would be a white conservative. White supremacist, well, that's a conservative. Doesn't matter what race. Apparently, they've expanded the definition. If you are a conservative, you must be a white supremacist. Also, fascist, that means conservative. Here's a good one. Gender, that's the combination of personality plus preference. Transphobia is when someone acknowledges biological reality. Gender affirmation is a rejection of biological reality. A couple more here. I thought these were really quite spot on. Misinformation means inconvenient fact. When you hear the term the science, that's a government-approved scientific claim. When you hear science or climate denial, which, by the way, you're going to be hearing about today, that means questioning government-approved scientific claims. When you hear the term expert, that means a person with a degree aligned with the mainstream. When you hear the term assault weapon, that simply refers to a black-colored rifle. By the way, his spelling is such because he is from the UK. Just letting you know, it's not a typo. Some people obsess over that. Aha! You misspelled something. You must be wrong about everything. Yes. How is it to live in that rarefied atmosphere where you live? Violence equals hurting the feelings of a woke person. Here's another good one. Anti-vaxxer. You see that used in a news story? Just know that they're talking about a person who opposes vaccine mandates and or refused to the COVID-19 jab. Diversity refers to fewer white men. Woman, well, actually it's unknown. We don't really know what that means. That's a term that I guess experts are still wrestling with as far as, trying to find a good, solid definition. So, having said this, let's dive into our next topic here. It's the hysteria over abortion in the state of Idaho. Now, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because we just came up and passed the year anniversary since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And Idaho's law now reflects it's one of the strictest anti-abortion laws in the country, which means the right to life for that innocent baby is protected as soon as there's a heartbeat detectable. This is intolerable to people on the left. And as you're going to see, it's not just a matter of, it's all about choice and reproductive rights and so forth. That's when the attention is shifted away from the innocent life that's at stake. But look at the fear-mongering and the absolute panic, and in some cases, just the cope that's being projected here. We'll start with Randy Stapoulis. This is an op-ed published in the Times News a couple of days ago. Pregnancy in Idaho has never been more dangerous than now. Oh yes, I'm sure that's true, Randy. Like when pioneers were arriving in covered wagons or traversing the Oregon Trail, yeah, pregnancy then was much easier because, they didn't have to wade through Idaho's abortion laws. And maybe a better question would be, why didn't they have strict abortion laws back then? There were laws on the books, even when Idaho was a territory, that recognized that you're taking an innocent life if you willfully cause a woman to terminate her pregnancy. But for some reason, people had it a little more settled in their minds, I guess, that life is precious, as opposed to that's an inconvenience and I need to take care of it. But let's continue on. More scary headlines. What else have we got here? How about this one from Kelsey Mosley Morris, a reproductive rights reporter. She's an abortion defender. She just has a little spin on her title to make it sound like a respectable thing. This is from the Idaho Capital Sun. Advocacy groups file lawsuit against Idaho's abortion trafficking law. Look at the scare quotes. Abortion trafficking. Complaint alleges law restricting travel for minors is unconstitutional and unclear. Well, what could she possibly mean by that? Well, maybe if we're talking about taking minors across state lines for the purpose of securing an abortion without their parents' permission. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but it seems like there's a line being crossed there somewhere, starting with parental rights, not to mention the whole abortion question as well. And when we're dealing with pregnant minors, it seems like maybe there's a couple other laws that we've gone afoul of as well. I think it's still pretty much on the books that it is illegal to get a minor pregnant. And the only thing I know of that would cause that is engaging in sexual activity with a minor, which is also illegal. Nonetheless, if they don't have immediate access to abortion right there on demand by whomever, including someone who's not their parents, maybe it's a coach or somebody who, actually got them pregnant. I don't know. This just sounds like a good way to cover up some dastardly behavior. Maybe not such a good idea. Check out this quote from the Idaho Statesman. Oh, my word. Well, despite Idaho's punitive abortion regime, something right out of A Handmaid's Tale, abortions in the region aren't falling. But a failing policy can still help a politician campaign for votes. Okay, that's about as cynical as it gets. You can see this is not so much a matter to them of defending innocent life versus, the reproductive rights of the mother. This is all about political power. And the idea that they call it Idaho's punitive abortion regime. But abortions in the region aren't falling, they assure us. Now, when they say the region, they're taking in very pro-abortion states like Washington and Oregon, which it turns out is where a number of Idahoans have been going for years in order to access easy abortions. But the defiance, that term of defiance. Well, they can still help a politician campaign for votes. Yeah, especially if that politician is pro-life. Look, it's okay if Washington and Oregon have different laws than the state of Idaho. Our state's laws should reflect what the citizens of that state consider, acceptable to them. Some states believe in gambling, some states don't. Some states, not naming names, believe in, legal pot. Some states don't. So on the matter of abortion, yeah, let them make up their own minds. But at the same time, let them own the consequences of embracing such anti-human practices. And if that's what their citizenry wants, then, hey, go ahead and sow what you're going to sow. Just understand, the law of the harvest applies to societies as well as it applies to individuals. All right, next headline. Oh, this one kind of slipped in there, but it seemed appropriate since we hear Idaho, compared to A Handmaid's Tale. I noticed there was a big story this last week talking about a gay couple, being presented with the baby, fresh from the mother. And so a gay couple presents surrogate mother with the gift of beautiful red robe. I'll just let that sink in for a second, but kudos to the Babylon Bee for some just wickedly sharp satire, which, of course, always contains an element of truth. Getting some mixed messages, right? All right, let's take a little bit closer look at this story. Idaho sued over law making it a crime to help minors get abortions without parental consent. I don't know if you have noticed this trend, but it's not just on abortion. It's also on so-called gender-affirming care, by which I mean surgical or chemical mutilation of children in pursuit of some gender dysphoria fix. Parents are being crowded to the side. And in some states, you actually can be held accountable for preventing your child from getting this kind of gender-affirming care, as they call it. That's a nice, fluffy euphemism, which does not even begin to hint at the emotional and permanent physical mutilation that's taking place. I mean, over and over, we're told, well, don't you know trans people kill themselves at a much higher rate? Does anybody stop to think that perhaps it's because there is something that needs to be addressed other than mutilating themselves? Perhaps there's a mental issue, and the help that they deserve is probably of a psychological type rather than, no, sure, we'll give you hormone blockers. Sure, yeah, we'll cut you up. We'll cut off whatever you want. It's very lucrative, business for those medical providers who call it gender-affirming care. But let's talk a little bit about abortion here in terms of getting abortion without parental consent. This is from idahonews.org. And the things they're trying to normalize here, 2 advocacy groups and an attorney who works with sexual assault victims, because we know only sexual assault victims would be looking for an abortion, are suing Idaho over a new law that makes it illegal to help minors get an abortion without their parents' consent. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to question, how often is it really sometimes, how often is it going to be a victim of sexual assault? We know that such things do happen. I'd love to know the percentage of abortions that are performed, though, for the sake of, look, this is inconvenient. I fooled around, I got pregnant, and I just need to do something about it because I can't interrupt my lifestyle. I think that's the vast majority, like high 90-something percent of abortions would encompass that. And only a tiny handful would encompass something like rape or incest or, a legitimate threat to the life of the mother. Which, by the way, Idaho law does allow for protecting the life of the mother. But this is not about just conveniently sweeping a problem under the rug. Abortion is already banned in Idaho at all stages of pregnancy, says the article, but the law, enacted in May, dubbed a travel ban by advocacy groups, by the way, it's just the portion in Idaho, and an abortion trafficking ban by the lawmakers who passed it, seeks to prevent minors who don't have parental approval from getting abortions in states where the procedure is legal. Violating the law is a felony punishable by at least 2 and up to 5 years in prison. So can we just visit for a moment the idea of a minor wanting to travel out of state in order to get an abortion without parental consent? Now, look, I'm not going to pretend that, minors need to be on the exact same footage as adults. The history of our laws, the history of our societies holds that there is a distinction between those who are old enough to make these choices for themselves, to engage in contract, if you will, and those who are not. And those who are not are wards of their parents or their guardians, and they basically are answerable to an authority which is not the state. That line is being blurred. You can only wonder, where is it supposed to be taking us? Well, I don't know if this is a good thing or if this is a harbinger of something that's much more dark, in terms of we've got to drive a wedge between minors and their parents to make sure that not only can they get abortion on demand, but they can also, get whatever, gender mutilation, hormones, or surgery they want on demand as well. Again, over their parents' consent. The ones who actually have legitimate authority, natural authority to help look out for and provide for and care for their children until they're old enough to make those decisions themselves. The Legal Voice activist group filed the lawsuit in federal court Tuesday on behalf of Nampa attorney Lourdes Matsumoto, the Northwest Abortion Access Fund, and the Indigenous Idaho Alliance. All of the plaintiffs work with and sometimes assist minors who are seeking abortions, and they want to continue that work without the threat of prosecution. They contend the law is overly vague and violates both their First Amendment right to discuss abortion with minors and their Fourth Amendment right to travel freely between states. All righty, then. We'll see. We're just being benevolent. All we're trying to do is help these kids, but sure seems like there's something a little darker at work here. Ignoring that some of the minors may seek an abortion because they were sexually abused by a parent or guardian, that they have consulted with trusted adults who support their position, or that they are actual victims of human trafficking. The legislature instead tried to stop pregnant minors from crossing state lines for care, the plaintiffs wrote in the lawsuit. Now, again, they're trying to paint this as, well, this is only to help people who've, been abused by their parents and so forth. Show me the numbers. Show me where this is such that we need to strike this law down, because that's where the majority of abortions are taking place. Again, I don't doubt that this could happen from time to time. A child could be sexually abused by a parent or a guardian and then become pregnant and want to seek an abortion. But I'm betting you could count it on one hand how often that happens compared to the ones that are just being done for the sake of convenience. That's a distinction I don't think that they're willing to make here. And it's a little bit spooky, and makes you wonder what other doors, next is going to be transporting a minor across state lines for sexual purposes. Oh, you laugh, but the grooming thing is more out in the open all the time. Seems to me this would be a very convenient way of helping to normalize non-parent adults taking children across state lines for purposes that, seem to fit in very well with that leftist agenda. Now, Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador's office declined to comment on the case because it's still pending, but spokeswoman Emily Kleinworth wrote in an email that the office is always prepared to vigorously defend laws passed by the legislature. Labrador has previously said that his office has the ability to charge people with violating the law, even in cases where the local prosecutor who would normally handle such decisions declines to prosecute. So it's not just a suggestion, it's an actual law. But again, the intent is to protect innocent life, not to ruthlessly micromanage everybody else's life. You don't get pregnant just from living your life. Certain things have to happen in order for that process to begin, and more often than not, it's a process that was entered into voluntarily, consensually, sometimes recklessly, and not a matter of, well, this person was raped or this person was sexually abused. Those are very much the exception. So let's stop pretending that that's the rule or that's the norm. By the way, the article assures us abortion remains legal in the neighboring states of Washington, where no parental consent is required, and Oregon, where people over age 15 can get abortions without parental consent. Well, hey, again, if this is what their state is willing to tolerate, that's fine. If that's what you want for yourself, then I would recommend maybe move to those states to avail yourself of it so that you don't have to risk breaking laws in a state where that innocent life is actually valued. One final thought here from the article. Idaho's law is also structured as an affirmative defense statute, which means anyone who helps a minor that's not their own child arrange an abortion can be charged with a felony, but they can later attempt to defend themselves in court by proving the minor had parental permission for the trip. Okay, this is not a matter of, well, we're going to control everybody to the nth degree, but there need to be some reasonable limits, just like you would not want people taking minors across state lines for sexual purposes. This is something that involves an innocent life, or at least the attempt to end an innocent life. I think it deserves a little bit closer look and not so much of that cavalier attitude of, the kid knows what's right. If they did, they probably wouldn't have gotten pregnant in the first place. Again, in the vast majority of cases. Many minors seeking abortions have to rely on an adult to drive them to another state. Even in the most populated part of the state, there are no public transportation options to travel the roughly 56 miles from Boise to the closest abortion provider in Ontario, Oregon, according to the lawsuit. Somehow it seems like this gets foisted off on the taxpayers too. And then the taxpayers need to provide for this because this is some kind of a human right. It's not. And you can figure that out very quickly by simply asking the question, at whose expense does this need to take place? Look, I understand we don't live in an ideal world, but there are some things that I think we can state with a little bit of certainty. One of those things is people who practice abstinence, kids who are taught the importance of practicing abstinence rather than engaging in reckless sexual behavior at an early age are much more likely to avoid pregnancy. Yes, it's possible. Somebody may get raped or sexually abused. Again, that's such a tiny percentage of the people who may come up pregnant in any given year. More often than not, it's from people just going with the flow of a society where, hey, pleasure seeking seems to be the main attraction. This is what people are building their whole lives around. I mean, look, we've torn this fence down a long time ago with the sexual revolution, but very few people have actually stopped to think, why was that fence put up in the first place? Why was the expectation that staying abstinent until you were married and then being, faithful and practicing 100% fidelity to your spouse in marriage, that was the norm. That was the expectation. And when people didn't practice that, it was considered a low-class thing for a teenage guy to get a girl pregnant. That was not something that your family celebrated. All right, fist bumps and high fives for everybody. No, it was actually a bit of a mark of shame. Well, we've come a long way from there. And some would say, though we've come in the right direction. I think there are those of us who would differ, and for good reason. But why the hysteria? Why is the left so absolutely consumed with the idea that anything less than abortion on demand at any time, up to and including seconds before the baby is ready to be born, full term, is somehow an affront? I can only assume it's because left-wing ideology at its heart is extremely anti-human. Let me give you another example of what that looks like. And again, how this is aimed at kids with the idea that they will make fine young comrades, fine young Octobrists, or young Red Guards as we move forward. Check this out. Idaho teens talk climate change at new summer camp. Teens from all over the country are headed to Illinois to discuss climate change campaigns. Oh boy, I can bet who's going to be in attendance. Let's take a quick look here, and where is it? There he is, front and center. It's our boy Shiva Rajbandari. Yep, he's the darling of the media. He's a foul, potty-mouthed child in some instances, but by gosh, he is on the right page when it comes to climate change. And this article is all about getting young kids to become climate change activists. Now, the funny thing is, Sunrise Movement Summer Camp is a free camp located in Illinois that teaches teenagers around the country about climate change. And I would just add that it teaches them about a leftist version of climate change, wherein the only solution is more government. While there, students build campaigns to address topics surrounding climate change and connect with like-minded individuals. I think they misspelled comrades, but that's certainly what they meant. Local Boise High School graduate Shiva Rajbandari will be leading teams of students from Idaho to Benton, Illinois for the camp. Students are coming from Boise, Timberline, Renaissance, Lake City, and Twin Falls high schools. I mean, it sounds like it could be a lot of fun, but let's not forget, the ultimate goal is for these students to learn about starting campaigns, workshops, storytelling, and more, basically becoming activists. Campers then can bring a plan to their schools and move forward, working toward a greener, more sustainable school environment, which sounds wonderful. Oh, a greener, more sustainable school environment, that's exactly what we want. That's what we need. Except it's going to come with more central planning, more collectivizing of the means of production, more collective control over you and your property, and more power to government. Oh, taking more of your money in order to do it. There's a lot of Marxism that underlies the current climate movement. According to the camp's game plan, a sustainable school environment will work toward including safe and clean buildings with 100% renewable energy. Again, it sounds wonderful, beautiful word salad. What exactly does it mean, though? And again, at whose expense? Students also learn how to incorporate a free and healthy lunch with sustainably grown ingredients. They're eating bark, insects. I don't know. Greta, can you enlighten us on this? In addition, there are opportunities to connect students with jobs after school relating to the climate crisis. Let me guess, government jobs? Just wondering. The camp's biggest takeaway will encourage students to develop plans for climate disaster relief. Now, look, I'm sorry to be a skeptic. I don't doubt that there is change that is being recorded in the climate, but I'm not at all convinced that it's not natural in origin primarily. This is not to say that human beings can't have a negative impact through pollution and other things, but I don't believe for a second that what's going on is something that if we just give enough money and enough power to people in government, we can fix this. And to that end, it's like the climate movement is, well, it's an iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg is, that climate hysteria, which these kids are being indoctrinated with at this camp. But the rest of the iceberg, what lies beneath the surface, really seems to come back to just plain old Marxism. I'm going to have to say hard no on that one. We'll take a hard pass, maybe some other time, but no. All right, moving on. Other topics to cover today. Got a couple good ones here. I don't know if, the controversy over books in libraries. And by the way, where I live in the Magic Valley, there has been some pretty interesting effort to go in and check and see, do we really have some of these absolutely nasty graphic books that are aimed at children? Sadly, the answer is yes, there are some of them present there. And this is despite assurances that, well, hey, we're just trying to celebrate everybody's life and make everybody feel like, they're important and they're being celebrated too. But I mean, this is some pretty graphic stuff that it's so graphic, in fact, they wouldn't even let you read a passage of it in a legislative hearing. Why? Because, well, we have kids who are underage as interns here. Okay, you don't understand that if it's inappropriate for them, it's probably inappropriate for school kids as well. Nevertheless, check this out. The Montana State Library Commission just officially voted to break all ties with the American Library Association over the fact that they elected a self-described Marxist lesbian as their president. They're the first state to separate from the ALA. This is the actual text of the release from the Montana State Library Commission. We immediately withdraw from the ALA and discontinue any further payments except for existing contracts to it or its subsidiaries. The body of the letter to the ALA is as follows. Dear Executive Board and officers, the purpose of this letter is to announce the Montana State Library's immediate separation from the ALA. Our oath of office and resulting duty to the Constitution forbids association with an organization led by a Marxist. Sincerely, MSL Commission. Now, where did they get the idea that this is a Marxist? Are they just calling names? There's a bunch of John Birchers on the warpath here? No, actually not. Take a look at this tweet. This is actually from the woman's daughter. Emily Dravinsky says, I cannot believe that a Marxist lesbian who believes that collective power is possible to build and can be wielded for a better world is the president-elect of ALA Library. She didn't mince any words, did she? I am so excited for what we will do together. Oh, here comes the fist. Solidarity. And my mom is so proud. I love you, Mom. I think they probably made a good decision there. Now the question is, Idaho, will you be considering separating yourself from the ALA as well? And if not, maybe it's time to consider it. Look, libraries are supposed to be a positive experience. Reading really is one of the greatest skills and one of the greatest gifts that you can give a child. You teach a child to read at an early age, you open up the possibilities to them in so many ways. So I guess it's natural that someone would seek some way to pervert that and turn it to something that's not so wholesome. And that's exactly what these activists have done. It's not about book burning. It's not about banning books. These books are still readily available if you want to go seek them out. But it's about establishing appropriate boundaries and age-appropriate limits for what is available to kids either in public or in school libraries. Does it surprise you that now you have an openly avowed Marxist heading up the American Library Association? I mean, this is one of the ways that Marxists do what they do. They deconstruct society. They deconstruct the institutions. Gee, do you think you'll see more or less of this kind of material finding its way into the libraries under the leadership of an avowed open Marxist? I mean, if you've studied anything about Marx and about his ideology and how it can't be something people voluntarily choose. They have to be absolutely mandated. There can be no dissent. You understand how truly anti-freedom and historically how anti-human it's been. I know Hitler gets charged. Well, he killed 6 million people there were 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, and there's 7 million people who were undesirables, and it's true. Yeah. That's an awful lot of deaths. And yet it pales in comparison to the number of people murdered by communist regimes. I wonder why they get a free pass. I wonder why, what was the guy's name? Was it Durante, who wrote for the New York Times back during the mass starvation of Ukrainians when Stalin was in power? He got a Pulitzer Prize and he denied, it's not happening. No, everything's cool. Everything's fine. They got the collective farms. They're doing just great. He lied. He covered for the Marxists. He covered for the communists. And right now they have been running roughshod through a lot of our institutions, enough to the point that some parents have said, I see it so clearly. I'm taking my kids out of some of those institutions like public school where that toehold has been established. One final thought. Let's end on a positive note. So journalism, as it is, really is about narrative management for the vast majority of corporate or news organizations. They won't tell you what's really going on, but they will tell you what to think and what the proper attitude is to have about something. Enter the Idaho Tribune, and a tip of the hat to them for an explosive bombshell about a new whistleblower document revealing multi-agency criminal conspiracy to spy on and entrap law-abiding Americans. They're talking about the Wooten memo, and they're talking about Bundy Ranch in 2014, as well as the Malheur Wildlife Refuge occupation and the killing of Lavoy Finicum. This is excellent reporting. It's damning evidence. It is something that, let's just say a few government supremacist heads are probably going to explode when they see that the mask has been pulled off and the corruption has been revealed, not by somebody who is in league with the Bundys or even agrees with them for that matter. Larry Wooten doesn't. But the guy has a conscience. and an unwillingness to go along with illegal and extremely unethical activities being done by members of his particular federal agency that he was working with. He's paid a pretty good price for coming forward as a whistleblower, but I would encourage you, keep an eye on that story. It's only beginning to come out in the open, and it's going to be curious to see what the spin is to try to cover this up or at least try to explain it away. Who knows? Maybe the media will just ignore it, but I won't. And neither will other really independent news organizations such as the Idaho Tribune. Kudos to them. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.